Hello, and welcome to my channel. This time-lapse is my interpretation of the Minoan Snake Goddess, a statuette discovered by Sir Arthur Evans in 1903 at the Palace of Knossos in Crete. It's debatable whether the statue represents a goddess, a priestess, or some other figure, since details about the Minoans are sparse. Also, she was discovered lacking a head and one of her arms, so who's to say what she truly looked like? I wouldn't necessarily call this a tutorial since I'm not qualified to teach anything. I'm not a professional digital painter, just some guy working two low-paying jobs trying to get by, so take my suggestions with a grain of salt. Or don't take them at all. In the description, I have provided a link to the reconstructions of Minoan dress by Dr. Bernice Jones. I relied heavily on her interpretations of the Snake Goddess, and any other Minoan figures I may or may not paint in the future. The cat references a Cretan wild cat, and the snake is a European cat snake. I have no idea if they are scaled properly or not. As you can see, I'm using Procreate symmetry feature to start the drawing. To access this, select the wrench in the upper left-hand corner, then activate the drawing guide, and then click Edit Drawing Guide and pick Symmetry option at the bottom right side. I use Jingsketch basic Procreate brushes for roughly 90% of this, but for the drawing, I'm using a modified technical pencil that comes with Procreate. I find it pretty good to use, not just for the underlying drawing as well as the finished drawing, but also for small details like scales or fur or any small detail like that. Here's some of the patterns for the snake as well. Despite the fact that I relied heavily on the symmetry feature in Procreate, I didn't want things to be too harmonious, so I flipped the snakes a bit. Another way to keep things from being too harmonious is to have the lighting affect one side instead of being directly head on. I also thought it'd be kind of funny to have the cat look kind of scared, which is why I looked for a reference image of the Cretan cat looking a little tense. I actually don't draw animals as much as I should, so not to toot my own horn, I was a little proud of how it ultimately turned out. I originally painted with a really dark reddish color with a low opacity, but I switched it to blue. And I don't know if very many people do that, but I've been toying or experimenting basically with it, and it's been giving me good results. So I've just been sticking with it. By sticking with the lower opacity, I could tweak the opacity to get as much contrast as I would like. I mean, we'll see that come into play a little bit later. I figured getting the two animals out of the way would probably be the make it or break it part for me. So I wanted to get as much done on them as possible, mostly because I don't really do animals as much as I should, at least. And plus I wanted to toy around more with the Jingsketch brushes, the basic ones admittedly, see what I could do while creating an illusion of texture like scales or fur. I probably could have pushed it a little further, but I mean, you probably won't even notice. I must admit, I have a habit of overpainting, basically painting outside the lines. It stems back from when I used to paint using a really crappy laptop with not a lot of memory. In order to get high resolution digital images, one where you could see things like individual lashes and all that, I would have to first start off painting on a low resolution image. I would draw it, and then I would work on, maybe something about a quarter of the size. And it would be extremely loose paint, establishing the flat colors and the shadows and the highlights. Then from there, I would I make multiple versions and up-res them for each particular part of the painting, like the hair, the face, the hands, the legs, etc. And when I would go to erase all the overpaint, the detail it wouldn't look like it was like a low resolution image upscaled. That's why I still have that silly habit. I don't really do any of that anymore in Procreate, even though considering Procreate's layer restriction, it might actually make a lot of sense to do that. I just don't care anymore about doing that. Like, whatever. Once again, I'm using the Jingsketch edge control brush for the eyelids, as well as some of the brow and also the lips. Otherwise, I'm using the round render for most of the shadow creation. The exception being the eyelashes and the eyebrows, where I use the modified technical pencil for those to get a little bit more detail. I wasn't sure if I wanted her ears to be hidden behind her hair or in front. I'll decide eventually. I just couldn't remember. Of course, it's important to make sure to add red tones to the cheeks and the nose. I mean, obviously darker skinned people, that might not be as visible, but people with lighter skin, you could usually tell. That also includes adding more desaturated colors to areas like the elbows, the palms, in her case the breast, but also like the legs too, and the nether and the groin region also tend to be more desaturated. After establishing the lighting for the Snake Goddess, I had to go back and readjust the lighting for the cat. It wasn't quite matching up. Also, I decided to make it a little darker. When it comes to her shirt, or I gotta figure out what the accurate term for it is, I wasn't quite sure what color to go on, so I basically just copied Dr. Bernice Jones' reconstructions for the colors and all that. Like I mean, I guess we'll never truly know because the actual figurine was damaged. I'm sure the paint was worn off, so we may never know exactly what color the shirt, quote unquote, might have been a robe actually, really was, but oh well, I just used her reference, her reconstructions, I guess I should say. Her hat, I totally went back to using Bernice Jones' depiction, because when I tried to copy the statues, it looked like something straight out of Super Mario. So yeah, I was like, I don't think that's gonna work. The jewelry, I would use, taking a stock airbrush, I could just increase the spacing of each paint stroke, or increase the spacing for the paint stroke, and then you could basically create a beaded necklace or a beaded bracelet. It's pretty simple. And then you could go and add shadows and highlight the individual ones, or if it's small enough, you might not have to at all. People might not notice. Just moving along with the final little details added, adding more rim light, also making sure to add some specular highlights to those silver thingies that are on her hat, and of course tweaking the background. Oh, almost forgot to add the shadow under the cat's paw right there. And also needed to add the necklace as well. That's just mostly wrapping up all the individual tiny details, and yeah, that's it. Thank you for watching this video. Hopefully you picked up the tiny bit of helpful tips I gave out. And yeah, thank you for all 2 of you who are watching.